The holidays are rolling around, and after finding out NRC doesn't really do much for them, U has taken matters into their own hands, demanding that all our favorite kiddos participate in one of the most sacred holiday traditions, the Secret Santa. The NRC kiddos either happily or reluctantly pulled names from the red cap and were given 2 weeks to prepare a small gift for their chosen recipient. Lucky for us, today is the day of the gift exchange, so we not only get to skip the wait, but we get to witness the chaos unfold in real time. So grab a snack, get a drink, and settle in for the festivities. Naturally, we'll firstly go over who picked who and what I think they got for their gift. Then we'll go into how I believe the gift would have been received. Along the way, we'll touch on EN server story content, so consider this your spoiler warning. Now, since poor Malleus always gets left out of events like these, I think you would have sought him out first and foremost, and then the rest of Diasomnia would have gotten involved due to proximity. As for Mal, he reached his hand into the hat and pulled out the name Azul. To be honest, I don't think Malleus has all that many interactions with Azul. Diasomnia on the whole is rather insular, and despite Azul's past efforts, he hasn't been able to crack their shell. This is a bit of a problem for Malleus in this specific scenario because now he must get information on Ashton Grotto so that he can provide the best gift. Unless we assume that in this timeline, Glorious Masquerade happened, in which case Malleus might already know that Azul likes coins. Regardless of how he gets this information, I think Malleus would provide an old coin from the Briar Valley to present to Azul during the holiday party. I highly doubt Malleus would worry about the cost given the nature of the Fae and of this event. Being invited to anything and receiving a random gift from one of his compatriots at that thing? It's such a novel concept that the dragon likely circled the party date on his calendar 10 times over. So, absconding with a single coin would be naught but a trifle. Azul, however, is also in part responsible for his near death during the Interdorm Spell Drive tournament, so Malleus picked a rather common coin from his homeland to balance out these two extremes. Azul, when receiving this gift, however, is immediately sent into panic mode because this coin is not only ancient, but extremely rare and therefore expensive. To his knowledge, there were only 3 other copies circulating around collectors' circles, none of which were as well preserved as the one that he received. This specific currency was rumored to have been melted down after some sort of ancient conflict to create household items like pans, cups, bowls, etc., resulting in its rarity. As Azul makes his mental calculations and attempts to produce any sort of noise, Jade steps in to assure the increasingly worried Malleus that the gift was so well received it rendered Azul speechless. Happy that he did well, Malleus returns to the party, leaving a snickering Jade and Floyd to care for the stunned cephalopod. Lilia, though, was all too happy to pull a name out of the hat when you offered it to him. A large smile grew on the Fae's face when he saw Grim printed on the paper. A smile that was as delightful as it was disturbing. After all, what better gift could there be for a glutton other than food? Surely little Grim, gourmet that he is, would be delighted to partake in a brand new recipe made especially for him. Lilia is a rather deft hand at cooking if you ignore the warnings of every other person around him, so with unbridled confidence, the Fae set out to the library to research cookies. After several sleepless nights, and with the reluctant help of Trey, Lilia was able to craft the finest tuna cookies the world has ever seen. He even made a few extra to share at the party, too. Extras that were promptly and discreetly incinerated by Malleus before being dumped into the trash on the day of the party to prevent food poisoning. Grim was not lucky enough to be spared from Lilia's cooking since he was the intended recipient of the gift, and at first the dire beast was all too happy to accept. Tuna-flavored cookies? Well, that's just a match made in heaven. The tin was unceremoniously ripped open, the cookies demolished, and the dire beast knocked out completely shortly thereafter. Lilia took this as a sign that his cookies were so good they put Grim to sleep, much like the holiday turkey is known to do. And so the Bat Fae happily tried to find his extras to share with everyone else. Grim, however, was comatose not due to a fulfilling meal, but because of the mysterious substance Lilia added to the cookies while Trey's back was turned. It was meant to give the meal more nutrition, but whatever it was, it had a rather nasty effect. Grim eventually recovered and went on merrily eating and drinking as the party continued, much to everyone's relief. One such relieved party was Silver, who had picked Ruggie's name out of the hat when you first came to the dorm. These two are both sophomores and have had some time to get to know each other due to their shared class, but I don't think they really interact all that much. In one of Silver's vignettes, Ruggie mentions he's heard rumors that Silver's a space case, suggesting a degree of distance between the two. In Glorious Masquerade, the two are a part of the same town exploration group, but they don't exactly interact all that much. However, given that Ruggie is the one that suggests the group find some handicrafts and specialty goods, I think Silver would likely try to get him a similarly handcrafted gift. The Briar Valley is known for its textiles and fiber arts, so I think Silver would attempt to make Ruggie a scarf for his gift. Not only would it be handcrafted, but it would also be tied to Silver, making it a memento of NRC as well as the Briar Valley. I think upon hearing that the scarf was hand-knit using materials from the Briar Valley, Ruggie's eyes might have lit up with dollar signs. After all, such a garment could theoretically resell for a pretty penny, even with a few flaws. But when asked what famous place had made the scarf, Silver sheepishly admitted that he made it himself, and some of Ruggie's reseller bravado faded. Folks might be convinced of the Briar Valley authenticity if they felt the scarf, but without a reputable brand name, it'd be too difficult to peddle online for those big bucks. Even still, the scarf is nice, the material quality good, and maybe Ruggie could eventually regift it to his grandma instead. With thanks exchanged, Ruggie makes sure to put the scarf someplace safe before demolishing the buffet. Can't have his gift getting dirty, now can he? The last member of Diasomnia to pick a name out of the hat was Sebek, and he ended up with Rook. Luckily, Sebek already knows the perfect gift to get Rook because he and him are kindred spirits. During the spectral soiree, Sebek learned of Rook's haunting childhood, one that mimicked his own training with Lilia and Silver. This turned Rook into his comrade instantaneously. To commemorate this moment and their shared spirit of survival, Sebek also turned to the fiber arts of the Briar Valley like Silver did, but instead of a garment, Sebek picked up a small tapestry. This specific wall hanging depicts a wild boar barreling through the forest, leaping over a fallen log as it's presumably pursued by an unseen hunter. Its desire to live is clear, its tenacity on full display as it navigates the perilous pitfalls of its environment to ensure it survives, fighting to the very last. When presenting this gift to Rook, Sebek would likely highlight their similarities and comment on how Rook is decent enough for a human, which is why he should be grateful to receive one of the Briar Valley's finest tapestries. Rook, I think, would be incredibly amused and grateful that Monsieur Crocodile held him in such high esteem to gift him with something so beautiful. This would turn into a long analysis of the tapestry and its meaning, one that Sebek cannot escape as Rook's ramblings start to resemble Sebek's own ramblings about Malleus. Eventually, Vil would step in so that the two could get something to eat, but it's abundantly clear that the gift was well received. I like to think Sebek turns this into a victory against Silver since Ruggie didn't speak with him for nearly as long or in depth, but who can say for sure? The next dorm that you visited after Diasomnia for the name picking was Heartslabyul. There was no way Ace and Deuce were going to let you get away with giving any other dorm second dibs, and I doubt you would have wanted to do so anyway. Much to A Deuce's disappointment, though, the first pick went to Riddle, who reached into the hat and pulled out the name Jamil. Now, despite being in the same year, I could not find much evidence of the two interacting, at least in my recollection, and even though they are both in the Nightmare Before Christmas and Glorious Masquerade events, they just don't interact that much with each other in either. But for some reason, I get the feeling that at this supposed point in time in the story, before winter break, that Riddle would likely be concerned about Jamil's academic standing, if he was aware of it at all. Riddle doesn't know why Jamil purposefully marks incorrect answers and gets lower grades. Riddle only knows that Jamil's grades are lower than they would have any reason to be, since Jamil is a vice housewarden, you know? So I think Riddle might decide to personally annotate a few books in the subjects that Jamil is supposedly worst in. From Riddle's perspective, this gift is very generous as it will only benefit Jamil's future and help him achieve an academic standing more befitting a vice housewarden. From Jamil's perspective, though, the gift is infuriating. Naturally, he has to put on a good face and thank Riddle for such a thoughtful gift that so much effort was put into, but underneath this facade, Jamil is seething. Soon enough, though, he's going to get his chance to overthrow Kalim, if we assume the main story timeline for the sake of this gift, and then he might even be able to use the books Riddle gifted him as the perfect cover story for his miraculously improved grades. Riddle would be none the wiser, and it might even allow Jamil to make connections with him for future use. Help. I think this eventually would have become Jamil's justification for this gift given his mindset pre-book 4, but I do think as he skims the annotations, he would actually learn a thing or two here and there, still rendering the gift useful. Due to his seniority and position as a vice house warden, Trey was allowed to pick second, and he pulled the name Leona. Interactions between the two are a bit light from what I remember, but I also just don't really pay attention to Trey enough to know. But both are in the same year, so it's likely they've had some form of interaction. I think Trey would be aware that Leona isn't a big fan of sweets, doesn't like vegetables, and is a prince, so the pool of potential gifts he could give that make use of his talents is quite limited. However, there is a proverbial ace up his sleeve in the form of dental hygiene. Therefore, I think Trey would get Leona a very nice automatic toothbrush. Even if he already has one or doesn't use it, Trey can at least use his knowledge to make the gift seem way more genuine and way less like an insult to Leona's breath. The lion is rather lazy after all, so a device like this would cut down on the physical exertion of this particular activity, no? Perhaps even letting him get to sleep faster? That at least was the reasoning Trey was banking on. I think Leona would have taken one look at the gift and immediately teased Trey about it being an insult to his breath and capabilities. Trey would have to use whatever charisma and earnestness he could muster to try to properly explain. Leona might have been a bit extra cranky at being dragged to this party, so eventually Trey would just have to lean into his vast dental knowledge full force. This expanded, serious explanation of tooth health and the toothbrush's capabilities would shut Leona up real quick, I think. If not for its earnestness, then for its shock value. I personally like to think that Trey's lecture brings flashbacks of Neji pestering the prince to brush his teeth properly, and due to this, I also like to think that Leona would thank Trey suddenly and heartily to get him to shut up. As far as Trey's concerned, the gift was a success, and that's all that truly matters, no? Now it's KK's turn, and he fortunately pulled the name Idia from the hat. This worked out super well because not too long ago he, Rook, Kalim, and Idia had an impromptu hangout during which the topic of music came up. Poor Idia had been looking so gloomy until this topic switch, during which the blue-haired recluse dove into a monologue about a group called Primo. The moment left a strong impression on Cater since he had never seen Idia talk so much or for so long. Therefore, Primo merch seemed like the perfect gift to give, but Cater had no way of knowing what Idia may or may not already have in this regard. So Cater wanted to take things a step further and get something signed. That way, even if Idia had the merch item, he'd likely still enjoy the gift. This also proved to be problematic because signed merch is mega expensive, and ultimately Cater just got Idia a personalized twist cameo equivalent message instead from the members of the band. When Cater first handed Idia his phone, the introvert was about ready to run out of the party. With the help of Ortho firmly holding his brother in place, the video could be played, and Idia nearly combusted. The video was to him from his favorite idol group. They knew who he was now, and they were saying encouraging messages directly to him. The poor boy couldn't decide whether it was better to scream or cry, but his now bright pink hair told everyone around that the gift was still, more or less, well received. Cater, of course, sent a copy of the video to Idia afterwards that he could keep as a memento. Despite his initial embarrassment, Idia totally has the video backed up in several different servers just in case, and every once in a while he may or may not revisit it for a little morale boost. Ace and Deuce fought over who would get to pick out of the hat first, so you suggested they simply Rochambeau it, and lo and behold, Ace won. Triumphantly, he pulled the name Ortho from the hat, which puzzled him a little bit. Technically speaking, by the main story's plot, Ortho would not be known to the freshmen by the time Christmas rolled around. However, Playful Land also takes place during Halloween, and Ortho and Ace do interact there, so we'll just figure that for Ace specifically, we're in the Playful Land timeline. Due to this, I think Ace would have a better idea of Ortho as a person and what he's kinda into, which could help inform his gift. Based on their interactions, Ace probably would have picked up one of those 3D wooden puzzle toys, but not one that was mass produced. Those would be too easy for Ortho to solve with him being hooked up to the internet. Instead, Ace got a handmade one from a local craftsman that would hopefully keep the android entertained. At the party, Ortho was delighted to not only receive something intellectually stimulating, but also something exceptionally well made. After a quick curiosity search for similar puzzles online, coming up with very few results, the android was even more excited. Ace was relieved that he liked it, but cautioned the android that he wasn't allowed to use any online information to solve it, just his own brain. Even still, it didn't take very long for Ortho to complete it, but it was still appreciated. There may have also been a small puzzle-solving competition started between Idia and Ortho over who could solve it faster, a competition that may or may not have drawn in other folks like Riddle to try their hand as well. And last up in Heartslabyul was Deuce, who picked up the name Malleus. Yet again, Deuce is getting sacrificed to Malleus. Poor boy's just got that luck, I guess. But I think based on that previous experience, our reformed delinquent might have picked up a tech repair kit for his gift. It's not exactly perfect since it's more geared towards phones than Roaring Drago, but the small screwdrivers will still work for battery replacements and things of that nature. It also wasn't overly expensive, which was another win for the freshman. Since it was going to a prince, Deuce recruited half of the dorm to help him wrap it properly, which was a spectacle in and of itself. Most of the folks just stopped by to figure out why the wrapping was such a big deal, and upon being informed the gift was for Malleus, concerned dorm members critiqued and assisted to hopefully keep Deuce from getting roasted. On the day of the party, Deuce mustered the same courage he did that day Malleus asked for his help and approached the dragon. With a puffed-out chest filled with bravado, Deuce presented the gift to the dragon. Malleus unwrapped it and was immediately confused. One gentle question and a confused reply later, Malleus's eyes lit up with mirth, a laugh escaping him. He thanked Deuce for the kit and explained that his phone had recently been damaged and was in need of repairs. Deuce kindly, but tragically, offered to help Malleus use the kit to repair the device and was handed a crushed pile of glass and metal. One awkward conversation about the limitations of the kit later, Deuce and Ortho were both trying their best to restore the very, very broken phone to some semblance of order. The repair kit was nevertheless well received, and the phone somehow miraculously turned on for a solid minute. It wasn't much, but it was enough to have earned Malleus's respect. Scarabia was you and Grimm's next target for the name pulling, as you wanted to give as many folks, including themselves, the best chance at getting picked by Kalim. Whoever he picked was surely going to either get a really nice gift or a really expensive one they could resell. Either way, it would be a win, but you was really hoping for a new roof or a gift that they could sell to get said roof. When Kalim stuck his hand into the hat, he ended up pulling two names out by accident. One of them ended up becoming Jamil's pick, while the other, Lilia, remained Kalim's. There was much delight from the house warden at having selected one of his pop music club buddies, and much sorrow from the Ramshackle duo at the fact that they weren't lucky enough this time. Kalim, though, knew exactly what to get Lilia and asked Jamil to gather a whole menagerie of traditional instruments from the Scalding Sands, from their storerooms. After much persuasion from Jamil and many, many reminders of the gift limit from you, Kalim eventually narrowed it down to one, which I'm going to leave up to the imagination of you, dear viewer. On the day of the party, Kalim approached Lilia enthusiastically, immediately offering him the instrument. Lilia was understandably delighted by this new addition to his collection, and decided that an impromptu concert was the perfect way to commemorate this gift-giving occasion. Kalim agreed, so the two had at it for a few minutes before other party participants, like Leona, kindly reminded them that others had yet to exchange their gifts and that the music was drowning out conversation. The two apologized and rescheduled the remainder of their performance for after the gift-giving session. Most of Diasomnia was subject to Lilia's practicing of this particular instrument for a few weeks afterwards, for better or for worse, but it's safe to say the gift was appreciated. The other name that Kalim had pulled, which ended up in Jamil's hands, was Cater. I don't know why the wheel decided the pop music club needed to be aligned in this way, but it did, so here they are. Luckily, Jamil knows a little bit about Cater from that impromptu party Kalim held with him, Rook and Idia. During the festivities, Cater had asked for spicy snacks, so armed with this knowledge, Jamil prepared some extra spicy snacks, which would keep well for a few weeks after the exchange. He has to cook for Kalim anyways, so he might as well use the Asim's wealth to cover this little exchange too. And since he also prepared a few of the snacks for Kalim, there was nothing suspicious about having extras. Cater, for his part, was delighted that Jamil remembered such a minor detail, commended him for it, took tons of pictures of the well-packaged treats, then tried them out. Jamil was not lying when he said they were spicy, and Cater was living for it. He shared some of the snacks with some of the jealous freshmen, catching wonderful pics of their reactions to the heat as well. Jamil also got some satisfaction from a doubled over ace and deuce, making the gift worth it. Cater savored the remainder for a while before eventually asking Jamil for the recipe to make some more, one that Jamil gave out readily while Cater helped him prepare various foods, including the snacks for Kalim one afternoon. You went to Pomefiore next, since they knew that Vil wouldn't settle for being picked last, and their party idea was well received. In fact, it was a little too well received, and you almost lost the house warden to discussions of proper party attire, possible themes, and a bit of scolding at how the prefect hadn't been enforcing any such dress code rules with the prior dorms. However, after those details were ironed out, Vil and his compatriots picked names. Vil was first, naturally, and he elegantly pulled out the name You from the hat. Now, Vil does gift the prefect a skincare set during the SDC, so I think for this specific party he would instead craft a specialty perfume just for you. Homemade cosmetics are Vil's bread and butter after all, and what better way could there be to thank the party's hosts than to give them something that elevates their beauty? He spent the next week or so experimenting with different ingredients and mixtures to come up with the perfect combination, eventually settling on a particularly lovely super secret blend. As for how you reacted, I think that's up to you lovely viewers to decide. I personally think they would be happy to accept this gift, trying it out immediately. Compliments would be uttered by their friends about how the scent really suits them, and I think both Vil and you would be pleased. But if you think it would have turned out differently, then please comment down below. However, next up in Pomefiore was Rook, and Rook reached into the hat with a flourish, receiving the name Riddle as his prize for doing so. Ah, how delightful! What manner of gift would he get for the tyrant? How would Riddle receive it? And what sort of expression would he make? Deciding to give him something truly unique, Rook spent hours crafting the perfect poem, one that accurately reflected the Queen of Hearts' rule-following tenacity, but also one that doubled as a riddle. Rook had heard through the grapevine that Riddle liked riddles, which was as joyous to say as well as hear. But something Rook could work with. After all, Rook is no stranger to wordsmithing, even crafting various poems on the spot during the Phantom Bride event. But making a poem that was also a riddle, now that was a challenge. Riddle, too, thought it was a challenge, spending more than 20 minutes trying to solve the riddle within the poem. At first, he was a bit confused as to why he was handed a poem, of all things, even a little disappointed given the other gifts being exchanged around him. But when Rook told him there was a riddle hidden within it, one that Rook himself had crafted especially for Riddle, the tyrant's excitement took over. Rook watched him intently, studying his expressions, gauging just how appreciated his work was by his query. The look of triumph on Riddle's face as he finally cracked the code brought nothing but warmth to Rook's heart, and the feedback he got on the composition of both elements was a bit surprising, but still appreciated. Epel was up last, and he ended up selecting Jack. At first, Epel figured getting his fellow some of his favorite protein powder would be a good enough gift, but after a long-winded speech about gifts from the heart or something along those lines, courtesy of Rook, Epel decided on something else. He spent the next few weeks crafting specialty cactus fertilizer instead, an idea that received approval from both of his dorm leaders. Crafting it with his own hands was actually pretty satisfying, and Epel learned a lot about desert flora. It likely wasn't going to help him with the apple farming, but it was another feather in his cap, one that hopefully resulted in a useful product that Jack would appreciate. The wolf wasn't really expecting something like this, but he was quite happy that Epel was supporting his hobby. Plus, it was something that Epel actually put effort into, a pursuit that Jack could appreciate given his own morals and dedication to his training. In a way, this was a form of training for Epel, so framing it like that made the gift even more special. Epel was happy that his hard work paid off and that Jack was satisfied. The two of them chatted about the cactus's growth over the next few months, changing the dosage of fertilizer here and there to maximize the benefits while minimizing the side effects. On to Octavinelle now, where you spent a considerable amount of time negotiating with Azul to convince him that the party and gift exchange would not result in him being indebted to anyone, and that no, Azul could not rig the name pulling. With a bit of strong arming from Jade and Floyd, Azul finally, reluctantly, reached his hand into the red hat. After a brief attempt to use look-through magic to pull the name Azul wanted, and a threat from Floyd, who subsequently redirected the look-through spell with his special magic, Azul pulled out the name Kalim, which at first was a moment of triumph. Imagine having Kalim in his debt over a silly little tradition. Oh, Azul was salivating. But then a problem arose. What do you get someone that has everything? You assured him that a gift from the heart would be more than adequate, but that's hardly helpful. Azul spent quite a while fussing over this dilemma, but a board game chat with a super nervous Idia revealed the solution. A novelty item. Surely Kalim has everything at his fingertips, which means he doesn't often go into places that have those cheaper toys and novelty items. His interest may be short-lived, but it would be something new and unique, in theory. So Azul got a robotic talking parrot toy for the boy. Kalim was absolutely delighted to receive this little robot, pre-programmed with 52 phrases, and immediately started to see how many things he could get the parrot to say in an hour. Jamil was not amused by the parrot's constant squawking, but even still he helped Kalim figure out the various functions, including a voice recording feature. This was immediately monopolized by the Pop Music Club kiddos and a few other party guests who began mixing and remixing their voices to create a song for the parrot to sing. Naturally, Azul casually reminded Kalim that if he ever needed more fun, or anything really, he could always come see him at the Mastro Lounge. This remark fell on deaf ears, though, since Kalim was much too busy with his compatriots and the parrot, but we can at least give Azul an A for effort. Jade was up next during the name selecting process, and he ended up getting Vil. A glance up at Floyd was all it took for Jade's intentions to be clear. However, his brother immediately vetoed being wrung out again, which was a pity, really, but reason enough for Jade to look elsewhere for a suitable gift. Similarly to Kalim, Vil is able to get any number of things for himself, especially high-quality items, and since Jade already procured those exclusive heals for the model, he wasn't feeling particularly generous for this little exchange. Instead, Jade figured some handmade pearl jewelry from the Coral Sea would be sufficient. A dainty set of earrings, a bracelet, or even a hair comb adorned with pearls should be something Vil could style easily. Since Vil was someone with an eye for craftsmanship as well, the intricate details would certainly not go unnoticed or unappreciated. Vil would be rather pleased with this gift, I think, since the accessories were given with thoughtful curation and not just because he wears such things. The craftsmanship is wonderful and the pearls themselves radiant, a meticulously thought out gift that Vil reminds Jade is tied to the exchange and cannot be used to indebt him. The eel, of course, feigned shock at the accusation before playfully lamenting that such a thought could have ever occurred to Vil. The model is happy nonetheless with the gift, carefully storing it with his things until the moment to wear it presents itself. Last was Floyd, who pulls the name Deuce from the red hat. Mackerel is the track kid, right? That means he needs shoes, no? So Floyd decides to go shoe shopping for his gift, which may or may not also be used as an excuse for him to try on a bunch of different styles himself. Eventually, Floyd decides on a cool sneaker for himself and a neat, sportsy one for Deuce. The shoebox is haphazardly wrapped in the same paper Jade used for his gift before Floyd takes it to the party. There, Deuce is stunned to see high-performance sports sneakers in his exact size, worth hundreds of thal marks, just sitting there in his gift box. Ace is fuming at the quality and expense of the gift, berating Floyd for not using his cash to help out the basketball team. Floyd retorts with intimidation, and the two go at it for a moment before Deuce finally recovers from his shock and thanks Floyd. With his attention back on Deuce, the eel is pleased that the shoes went over well, and that Deuce seems to know a thing or two about the sneakers. The two exchange some idle chatter over the shoes' details, which eventually evolves into a productive conversation about footwear. Now Floyd is pumped to get some blast cycle boots, and Deuce can't wait to break in his new running shoes. The next storm that you approached for the name selection was Ignihyde, since Ortho had tipped them off earlier that Idia was in a pretty good mood and therefore might be a little more receptive to the idea of a party. It took about an hour of convincing and pleading, but Idia reluctantly pulled out one of the slips of paper and was horrified when he found out it was Sebek Zigvolt, the loud, extroverted, athletic draconian that will blast your ears off if you so much as mention Malleus. Nope, nope, not happening. After some desperate pleading with the prefect to try again, which was not allowed, Idia eventually came to accept his fate. Now came the problem of figuring out what this kid would possibly want or be happy with. Ortho suggested giving Sebek something that represented his Oshi, but it's not like any digital pictures of Malleus existed, so Idia couldn't just print a photo card and call it a day. He'd rather be caught dead than reveal that he knows what glowing is in front of half of the school by gifting Sebek a green glow stick, and everything else Idia was thinking up seemed just as cringy. Finally, he settled on a protein powder since he saw Jack drinking the stuff when he was watching him for PE, and Sebek was also a sportsy extrovert, so it should be fine for him too, right? Idia picked one that had a lightning bolt on the package and was dragged out of his room to the party by Ortho. With some mumbled words, the protein powder was shoved into Sebek's hands before Idia retreated to the shadows. A confused Sebek at first scoffed at the present, thinking it was a bit too basic, but his loud description of the product caught Jack's interest. The wolf came over and chatted with Sebek about his gift, revealing that this particular brand is specially formulated for peak performance. Armed with this new knowledge, Sebek praised the gift as a worthy addition to his training, commending Idia for contributing towards Malleus's future. Idia couldn't care less that the gift was well received, but at least the display of pride on Sebek's part was quickly transferred to something else as Grimm began making a ruckus at the buffet table. Ortho, unlike his brother, very excitedly pulled the name Epel from the hat and was quite delighted to get one of his fellows. As mentioned previously, Ortho is a little bit of a special case because the main story timeline doesn't really work for him to be included in this sort of thing since it's happening during the current game year, but we're gonna make do. I think Ortho would have seen Epel carve various apples into various things during their lunch breaks and would decide to give him a very fancy but still practical paring knife that Ortho designed himself. He did a lot of research about harvesting to come up with an appropriate inlay pattern for the hilt, as well as found the optimal steel for the blade. Putting all the elements together proved to be a bit tricky, but once completed, the blade was a work of art in its own right. When Epel opened his present and saw the blade, he was quite giddy. Sure, he already had one he used quite frequently, but this one was handmade by his friend and harvesting themed. He couldn't have asked for a better gift, or well, maybe he could have asked for something to make him taller, but this'll still do. Ortho was so happy to see his gift go over so well, though he was surprised that Epel materialized an apple out of somewhere to test the knife on. It cut the apple like it was warm butter, and Epel found it incredibly easy to wield. Ortho revealed some additional info about his build, including the precise hilt measurements meant to give Epel, specifically Epel, the best maneuverability. The two chatted for a while about the specs, testing out a variety of carving techniques in the process, eventually offering the apple artworks to Grimm to eat to get him away from the buffet. The last storm to pick names was Savanaclaw, since you had a difficult time finding Leona. The lion had heard about this little tradition and decided he wanted nothing to do with it. But with the help of Ruggie and Jack, he was eventually located and forced to choose a name. Leona took the piece of paper, read the name Silver, and then dusted the slip disinterested. The lazy lion then completely forgot about the exchange until Ruggie came knocking on his door on the day of the event. With some force, the lion was removed from his bed and shoved out the door, but not before Leona managed to grab one of his pillows. The pillow was then sacrificed to Silver as Leona's secret Santa present. Something about needing to sleep better at night, to not fall asleep during the day, and special sunset savanna feathers might have also been said to twist the gift into something thoughtful. With this reasoning, I think Silver would be very appreciative of the thoughtful gift. Silver has likely already tried various different pillows, sheets, mattresses, and all sorts of combinations to potentially sort this problem, but I think he would be swayed by the sentiment Leona presents his gift with. To have a relative stranger, one that tried to harm his lord, still care enough about his personal predicament to gift him something so thoughtful, surely Leona couldn't be that bad then. It's a bit of a blessing that the lion happened to pick Silver, as I doubt anyone else would have accepted the pillow quite as well. Ruggie was up next, and he pulled out the name Jade, which was a bit of a relief to the hyena. After all, he had the perfect gift idea that would cost him absolutely nothing, a handmade cookbook specifically for foraged foods. Recently, Ruggie got caught swiping some of Jade's foraged plants and had to teach Jade some special cooking techniques as compensation. But there was always a risk that Jade forgot or pretended to forget what he was taught, leading the eel to bother Ruggie again. If Jade had a cookbook to easily reference, he'd have no need to bother the hyena, and that reference guide could be made with regular school supplies. This nearly free gift would also maximize Ruggie's return once he resold whatever he was getting at the exchange, so the book was crafted and gifted to Jade at the event. Jade, for his part, was pleasantly surprised by the thoughtfully handmade gift, remarking that it was quaint yet useful. The eel also remarked that only one of the recipes included was new. Ruggie, of course, told Jade the singular inclusion was a bonus that he was giving him, no questions asked, and that the cookbook was mainly meant as a reference anyways, so he should be happy to have gotten anything new at all. Jade agreed with an unreadable expression before affirming his thanks. I think that Jade was secretly delighted to have a tangible foraging book that was made by someone with plenty of experience. Knowledge and information can sometimes be more valuable than material wealth, after all. Jack was last, and he selected Ace, one of his fellow freshmen, for the exchange. I think these two would have had ample time to bond after the interdorm spell drive games for Jack's ceremonial robes vignette to have happened, and I think based on this interaction, Jack would have selected a high-quality playing card set for Ace's gift. After all, the kid does have skills when it comes to sleight of hand, especially with cards, so the deck is something that he would use. Plus, the fancy embossed printing and crisp gold sprayed edges might cause Ace a few problems when he tried to hide the cards up his sleeve, forcing him to play fair, even if but for a moment. The cards were received exceptionally well by Ace at the beginning of the party. He had his eyes on a fancy deck like this for quite a while, but just couldn't justify the cost himself, so to be getting it as a gift was practically a win-win. Naturally, Ace challenged Jack to a game to break in the new deck, which the wolf happily accepted. The two went on for quite a while, adding in other folks who wanted a chance to play between rounds, up until Grim tried to eat a card to prevent someone else from taking it from his hand. The fancy deck was swapped out for a normal one for the remainder of the evening, lest Grim decide to try to swallow another card. Now, of course, since our Ramshackle duo was handing out the names, they also had to pick one for themselves. So the remaining names in the hat got assigned to Grim and the Prefect, respectively. Grim already sneakily took his name out before the Prefect started distributing because he wanted an easy target and he wasn't going to let the opportunity slip through his paws. Grim, therefore, picked Trey because Trey already accepted his gift of tuna during the Spell Drive tournament, so all he had to do was part ways with another one. Easy peasy. Of course, it'd still hurt to be giving up his precious tuna, but that was a small price to pay considering Grim could be getting something even better in return, like premium tuna. So with his can wrapped in a cute bow, Grim headed to the party, found Trey, and bestowed the tuna upon him. Trey likely would have been a bit disappointed at first, but after seeing Grim get instant karma in the form of Lilia's cooking that he also had a bit of a hand in, Trey likely would have been satisfied. As an apology for Grim's terrible manners, the Prefect would have prepared some premium toothpaste for Trey as well, a gift he was much happier to have received. The teasing Ace began about the tuna can would also shift into complaints about how unfair it was that Trey got 2 gifts, and how the Prefect should have given him something else too. The regular chaos in the Heartslabyul group would begin, and all would be right in the world. The Ramshackle Prefect was stuck with the very last name in the hat, Floyd, for whom they had a brilliant idea. After consulting with Sam on the special order and securing Malleus's help for the final touches, the Prefect presented Floyd with a large shrimp plushie at the party. Merfolk don't typically have stuffed animals since they don't hold up well underwater, something that Jade points out during the Harvest and Sledathon. But what if one could be enchanted so that it doesn't share that fate? A stuffed animal that could survive both land and sea. Wouldn't that be novel? Interesting, perhaps even perplexing. Upon receiving the plush, Floyd would likely tease the Prefect about the shrimp, or perhaps even be a little bit disgruntled at receiving something so childish. But once he's told that the plushie has been enchanted to hold up underwater, the eel turns into Sherlock Holmes. He might be tempted to run into the Diasomnia courtyard and dunk the shrimp in the fountain to see if it's true. He might be tempted to dunk it into the party punch bowl to test that as well. He might even ask Kalim to summon some water, subsequently flooding the party just to see if it's true. All this and more might have happened, But regardless of the specifics, I think Floyd is testing the enchantment immediately and being occupied by the gift for a few hours. That, or he couldn't care less. It's hard to say exactly how he'd react, but that's the beauty of a Floyd, no? Now that everyone has their gifts, the party can begin in earnest, with feasting and merriment for all of our favorite NRC troublemakers. If you were wrapped up in this holiday fun, what would you have gotten Floyd? Or would you have picked a name out of the hat first, like Grim did? Do you think the boys would have picked these gifts or reacted to them like this? Or are there other options you think better suited or other reactions that they might have given? Let me know your thoughts down below, but if comments aren't your thing, you could always let me know you enjoyed this video with a like or subscribe instead. And as always, I'd just like to remind you that you're amazing and I hope you have a wonderful day.